Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 3 of our Home Buyer Forum. Today, we will be talking with some of our experts, some of our favorite experts, about assembling your team for home buying. We're going to hear from a realtor, an attorney, and a home inspector. So lots of great information today. Just to let you know, today is in webinar format. And that means for all the folks who are attending, thank you for coming. We cannot see you or hear you. So go ahead and eat your lunch, take care of your kids, do whatever you need to do while participating in this webinar. That's fine. We do want your active participation though. Please use the Q&A feature of Zoom to submit your questions. We love to answer as many questions as we can on these webinars. If you don't see Q&A on your Zoom toolbar, go into the 3 dots on the right of your Zoom toolbar, and you'll see the Q&A feature where you can submit questions. If you want right now, you can go in there and just let us know where you are joining us from. We'd love to hear that and get a sense of our audience. This presentation is being recorded, and you're also going to get the slides sent to you. So don't worry about taking a million notes. You're going to have them, all the slides and the recording sent to you. At the end, we're going to be suggesting that you fill out a survey. You'll also get that link in your email. And we do love your honest feedback about how these sessions go and all of our webinars and workshops. We read every piece of feedback that we get, and we take it to heart and think about it for next year. So thank you for doing that as well. My name is Jen Fries. I am the Community Engagement Manager for Harvard FCU. I am a certified credit union financial counselor. Have a background in nonprofit management and in the local area. And I have bought and sold condos and houses just personally in the past in the local area, Cambridge, Somerville area. So I've had that experience. So I bring that to this homebuyer forum, and I am your host for all 4 days. So again, today we're talking about assembling your team. Earlier in the week, we talked with our mortgage loan officers about the home buying process. We also had a session on affordable home buying with our partners at Mass Housing. If you missed either of those, again, you'll get the recordings sent to you. So don't worry about that. You can catch up. And tomorrow we're going to be talking about, for those who already own a house and have some equity built up, what are some of the decisions you might be making about, should you be downsizing, upsizing? Do you want to do renovations? Are there other things you want to tap into your home equity to do? What are your financial goals? So you can go ahead and register for that session as well. If you would like to join us for that, we would love to have you. And just by attending today, you are entered into a raffle. Thank you for attending. We definitely appreciate your participation. So if you get an email from me, from Jen Fries at Harvard FCU, about a raffle prize, I know it sounds like spam, it is not. That's because we chose your name at random from the attendees, and these are some of the raffle prizes that we're giving out. So you can look for that, and good luck to everybody. Just a little bit about what a credit union is versus a bank. A credit union is a not-for-profit financial institution. So we're very similar to a bank. You can have a credit card, checking, savings, CDs, mortgages, obviously, with Harvard FCU. The thing that is different, though, is a bank is owned technically by shareholders, and they're making a profit for their shareholders. The credit union is owned by our members, by the people who are part of us, who deposit money. I'm a member of Harvard FCU, and you can be too if you're not already. We do offer lots of great services because we're not trying to make a profit for someone else. We are trying to run the credit union in a way that works for our members. And some examples of that are refunding any fees that you pay on ATMs nationwide, and just things like this that we do, where we do like sessions in the community on financial wellness and access to free financial counseling. And we'll talk about that later. So those are some of the ways we try and give back to the community. So again, today, first we're going to hear a little bit about the market conditions and anything you need to know from a realtor's perspective. Then we're going to hear from an attorney who will walk you through that whole process of making an offer and what to expect and going through with your deal. And we're going to hear from a home inspector as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dino Confalone. He is a realtor at Sotheby's International. He is very active, I believe, the chair now of the Greater Boston Association of Realtors and lots of other commendations, and just really a key player in the Boston realty world. And we're really delighted to have Dino back again to speak at our Home Buyer Forum. Dino has more than 3 decades of experience in the industry. He's a graduate of Suffolk and has got many industry awards over the years. He is somebody also, I think personally, that knows about putting down roots somewhere, and he's involved with town soccer and raises money for a group that assists homeless children. So Dino's just an all-around great guy, and we're really happy to have you with us here today, Dino. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. That was so nice. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. For the next few minutes, we'll be talking a little bit about the market and some issues that have been in the industry that I'm sure you guys have heard of. I'm just going to go through my slide deck. I will be here for Q&A after, so feel free to write down your questions or send them through the text or through the chat, and then we'll go from there. So if you guys could just start going through the slides, we're going to do market trends and then some industry news about some adjustments to the industry, the real estate industry, that is. Thank you, Jen, for going through my bio, so we don't have to do that. I am very active in the association from a leadership perspective, and I'm really well versed in what has been happening in the industry, and I've actually taken part in some things going on in the industry. So I'm proud to be part of the association and be an industry expert. Where we were and where we will be, and then real estate news. Those are the 2 parts that I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide. So what I tried to do was come at it from 3 tiers. I'm looking from a global perspective, then the national perspective, and then kind of give you some ideas of value locally, hyper locally, in the Boston market. So data in this slide, the next few slides are going to be pulled from various resources. For example, I got this one from the International Monetary Fund, and it pretty much shows that global growth is expected to be flat, and inflation overall is expected to decline into 2026. So from a political perspective, we know there's things going on in Washington, but overall, globally, I think because of some things going on where the projected growth is flat over the next few years because of the uncertain factor of what's going on nationally in the United States. I did pull this one from the Congressional Budget Office, and this reinforces what all other indicators are saying, is that we are really unsure what's going to happen. So GDP is expected to just be flat over the next few years. And we are seeing some easing on the inflation, and the forecast obviously is slow growth with rising unemployment. It's going to potentially reduce interest rates. So right now, we're pretty much in a holding pattern. The Fed has basically put a pause on everything, so it's just going to be kind of neutral, and that's the best that we can do from a forecasting perspective. Next slide. So trying to look at some markets that have been really great hot spots, if you will, in 2025, and Boston and Cambridge continue to be one of the most desirable places to be in the country. My office is right between Harvard and MIT on Mass Ave, and I've been there since 2008, and it really has just been a phenomenal market. I actually really enjoy Cambridge and Somerville, and the Boston market has been phenomenal. And the slide that we're going to come into will show values over a 20-year period. But when you're looking at the big picture and interest rates in general, I mean, it's, I refied right after the pandemic at 2%, and I know we had to just do it. Like everybody was in the same boat. You're not going to see rates like that, and we're not going to see those rates again, unfortunately. But this slide shows over 50 years, the average interest rate is close to 8%. And that's pretty much what it has been across the board. We are looking at most likely, actually, the next slide is going to have what we're forecasting. So here we go. This is pulled from the National Association of Realtors, where we get a lot of our data from. And you see across the board, it's pretty much flat, 25 and 26. And then this is where we are anticipating the 6% number. And I'm sure the Harvard Credit Union has their forecast as well. But from a national perspective, we are not expecting rates to go under 6.5% over the next year and a half or so. And that's pretty much the forecast. Here is the slide that I was referring before when it came to appreciation over 20 years. So the Greater Boston Real Estate Association, I was president in 2021, and we did a snapshot of 64 cities and towns within the 95 belt out a little bit into 495. And overall, I don't know if you can read this, but it shows the appreciation year over year if you bought on the left side is the condo, on the right side is the single family, and you see if you started in 2004, how the values, well, that's the appreciation value has increased over year. But if you just pause at 2008 and 2009 when the financial collapse happened, it showed a consistent, that there was definitely a pause, but then again, an increase in growth. So it really, when people talk about the rates, it really doesn't, it's not, trying to time the market when it comes to like trying to get a rate. It's time in the market. So, and every time someone says when's a good time to buy, it really is today, because tomorrow you don't know where it's what's gonna happen. I mean, we're not seeing, based on history, a complete collapse in the market, even in the financial collapse in 08. So for me, real estate's been good to me and my family, and I feel like I'd rather be doing this than paying rent. And the appreciation is a great benefit, in addition to writing off some expenses on properties that we have. Next slide. Some important local factors. Actually, over the next, this slide was like literally 2 weeks ago, so I'm just thinking the fourth one down, faster job growth. Right now, we're anticipating some unemployment, so I would not factor that in. But there are definitely more first-time home buyers in the millennial age. We're seeing a tremendous amount of wealth transition from the baby boomers to millennials. I personally am experiencing that with a lot of my clients. But there definitely is a pent-up seller situation with people that have stayed in their homes, especially after they refied, like I did, and they just don't want to leave their home. So there's a lot of people that are just ready to move, and we are anticipating a boost in inventory. It's been a situation over the last couple of years, not having enough homes to sell, and that has led to some crazy things going on. But overall, we are expecting more inventory. Next slide. So that was market data. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what the changes in the industry. And pretty much, if you've heard this in the news, I mean, it was all over the news back when the Department of Justice basically had an issue of how buyer agents were getting paid. And that was the core of it. I would say buyer agency only really came in effect in the mid-90s. And that was truly needed because you do need representation as a buyer. You want to partner with a realtor. You want to have a good team. That's the whole point of this, is assembling a good team. And what happened is, so the way that the commission had been structured was the seller would basically offer a compensation to a buyer agent. And a buyer agent would speak with their clients and say, oh, my services are free. When in reality, they're not. Even though the buyer's taking the money and bringing it to the transaction, the seller was determining where the funds were going. And that's truly where the core of the issue was. And so what ended up happening is we basically had adjustments in the law. Two things: a buyer agent needs to have a contract now. And number two, it cannot be offered online. A lot of companies are still doing it, but that's not in line with what the Department of Justice settlement states. So those two things: buyer agent's contract and no commission listed online. Next slide. So buyer agent contract. So I highly recommend working with someone that knows the market. Do not sign right away. I mean, you need to review this. You want to make sure there's specific time frame. You can even do one for one day, just to experience how this person works. You want clear expectations on both sides. You know, If you retain a buyer agent, you really should not be communicating with the seller agent. The buyer agent's job is to be the facilitator. Absolute clarification on how agency compensation is handled. And this is what the Department of Justice wanted to make sure was out there, was buyer agents are able to negotiate and sellers are able to negotiate what the compensation for realtors are. And then I put a little asterisk there. In our region, sellers generally continue to offer buyer agency compensation. And that is something that Sotheby's does, is we recommend to our sellers that you really should be offering compensation, because most buyers, they have their 15, 20% down, some 5%. And adding that component is a burden. So we want to alleviate that burden, but it's just all disclosure, all transparency. Everyone's talking on the same board, on the same page. In our listings in Sotheby's, we basically say seller is willing to entertain a buyer agency compensation. We just don't put the percentage in there. So that's up to the negotiating between the agents, between the buyer, and between the seller. Next slide. This is so when it comes to the home buying process, this is pretty much the timeline. And so as you can see, it says obtaining pre-approval. That's number one. I know Ryan's on the call. Make sure your pre-approval is set and you know what your price range is before you start going to open houses, before you engage with a realtor. But that's the most important thing. And then the realtor is going to be able to handle this entire process with you. So I see myself as the quarterback in a football game, and I'm pretty much managing the plays and managing all the people, including the attorneys and the inspectors, which Kenra is on the call, phenomenal inspector. So I do think that this is something that the realtor really is able to manage, and the inner workings of every single detail, that person's going to be able to help you and make sure that your interest is in mind, not the seller's interest. That's the critical component about having buyer agency compensation. Buyer agent representation is having someone on your side that you can trust. It's going to give you market data, is going to be able to handle the entire process. Next slide. So again, going back to the rate, you can't really time the market, but it's about time in the market. So you don't marry the house. You marry the house, you don't marry the rate. Focus on what makes you happy. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? If you truly are going to be here for a while, it is definitely worth investing. Do not wait, get pre-approved. Values will not decrease. That's my forecast. That's my experience. I cannot see it tanking. Hire buyer agent. You need a guide through the process. And that's pretty much my side. And I did that pretty much in record time. So Jen, you can come on back. Thank you guys. I'll be here for questions.
Thank you,
That was
Dino.
pretty good timing.
It was great. Thank you. And I do want to say to people who are attending, at any time, go ahead and go into that Q&A feature and drop your questions into the chat. We will be coming back, bringing all the panelists back at the end and having them answer your questions. So please, please go ahead and do that anytime. Don't feel like you have to wait until the end. So now I am delighted to introduce Sarah Ricciardelli. She is the founding partner of Ricciardelli Small, LLC. It's a law firm specializing in real estate. So this is what they do. Attorney Ricciardelli has more than 25 years of experience representing home buyers. And she's just really great at helping people through, you know, all of the big and small surprises that can happen when you're dealing with the legal issues around a home sale or a home purchase. So thank you for joining us, Sarah, and I'm excited to have you back.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate being invited back. This is a great seminar. I know you guys do a great job in trying to teach people really what you need to know about buying a home. There are a lot of pitfalls that, you know, a good team can help you to avoid. And I'm going to go over a little bit about the documents they're going to need to be signing and what a closing really is, because people ask me that question all the time. And we'll go over that a little bit. Next slide. As Jen mentioned, we are a real estate firm. We practice only in residential and commercial real estate and no others. And having someone who specializes in real estate is super important, because if you dabble in this industry, you don't know all of the nuances or issues that could arise as you're helping a buyer navigate through the purchase of condominiums, single family, multi-families, and commercial space. We represent buyers, sellers, and lenders and have approached the transaction from every perspective. Next slide. So what is the first step from a legal perspective that binds you when you're purchasing a home? You're going to go with your agent, with Dino, and look at a bunch of different properties. And so one of the first things that once you find a home that you want to put in a offer on is called an offer form. We are very different from other states in that we have a two-part purchase transaction. We have an offer, which is a very simple 2 to 3 page document that's fairly templated as to what's in there. And that gets signed when you're negotiating the price and the closing date and things you might want in the home. And then the second document you'll talk about after is called a purchase and sale agreement. And a purchase and sale agreement is an 18 about page document that gets into a lot more nuances. Strongly recommended that after you sign an offer that you do engage an attorney to help you with that much longer format. So what's an offer? As I said, is a very templated document. And in there, you'll have things like what price you want to pay, what closing date you want. Closing dates in Massachusetts, you should be aware, are in-person closing dates, meaning that you have to appear at someone's office. We do not allow a virtual notary. We have a wet signature state, so you do have to appear in person. So keep that in mind when setting your dates. The offer has in there, as I said, some contingencies that you can add. And so what types of contingencies can you add? One is a mortgage contingency, which says that I will buy this home contingent on my lender approving me for a mortgage of X amount. And you'll fill in those dates and whatever amount you need. And so being pre-approved by Harvard in getting you confirmed as to what amount you can actually get approved for in a loan is important and can help expedite the process. I've worked with Harvard for a very long time, and I know how good they are at making sure that if they're pre-approving you or giving you a mortgage commitment, that they're making sure that you really can afford this home and taking your interests at heart and not just sort of approving you and putting you in a situation where later in the future, you might be in a position where you may not be able to afford the home. Anything that goes into the offer as far as contingency, so it'll have the financing contingency, it might have an inspection contingency, which I know Ken will go over, but essentially an inspection contingency is saying, I will buy this home contingent on my having the ability to hire a home inspector to look at the property and me feeling comfortable to move forward. And like I said, Ken will go into that further, so I won't touch too much on that. And then there are other contingencies, not in a templated offer, that you can write in. One of them might be, I will buy this home contingent on it appraising at a certain value. Some people want more than just it being approved for a loan amount. They want to make sure the home appraises for a certain value. And it's a good contingency to have. However, in a competitive market, a seller's agent likely will strike that provision because if you're competing for a home, they're not going to allow you to have an appraisal contingency saying that it's got to appraise at a certain value, just that you may have a financing contingency on there. You may want to have a home sale contingency. I think most of your first-time buyers, but if you have owned another property and you want to make a contingent on the sale of your home, because that's the only way you get approved for the mortgage, you can try to write that in. But again, in a competitive seller situation, that might not be well received and might prevent you from getting approved for the property. And so it's sort of a weight and balance to decide what you want to add in the offer to make it competitive and what you want to add in the offer that makes you feel safe that you have no issue in purchasing the home. You can add in a contribution towards closing costs. I've seen that happen a lot. So if you feel that you might have better flexibility to have the seller pay some of your closing costs, you could say, I offer you $100,000, provided you give me $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 in closing costs. And that might save you some upfront money, which I've seen people do. If there are any appliances, especially like a washer dryer, which is always kind of that gray area, you want to make sure you list all of those in the home. If you want window treatments, chandeliers, things, all of that, it needs to be included. If you're buying a condo, then you want to have a condo review contingency. And what that means is, I'm offering this amount on your home, but this offer is contingent on myself and my attorney reviewing your condominium documents, perhaps looking at your financials, looking at meeting minutes to make sure there's no surprises coming up in the condominium. And things do come up. And sometimes a seller did know and didn't disclose. And other times Sellers aren't reading those meeting minutes very carefully and may not realize that there's a huge assessment on the horizon. So that's part of what we call due diligence. And so it's important between the offer and the purchase and sale to do your due diligence. Typically in an offer, the amount of the deposit is usually, $1,000, $2,000, though I've seen people try to give competitive offers and put in $10,000 or more in an offer situation. But once you sign that purchase and sale agreement, generally it's at least 5% that you're risking if something happens and you can't close outside of any contingency you built in, like a financing contingency and things like that, or a home sale contingency. So those offers, they're super important, even though they're short and 2 to 3 pages. And so having a good team to help you in putting that offer in is incredibly helpful, because navigating it on your own is not something I recommend as an attorney. It is a legally binding offer. And so you want to make sure you know what you're doing, and having a seasoned professional who knows what they're doing to help you fill in that offer is incredibly important. Many years ago, now I'm dating myself because I'll probably say, 20 something years ago, there was a case that came out called McCarthy v. Tobin. And in the state of Massachusetts, it declared that these very simple templated offers are binding. In fact, in real time, and I like to give examples, I have a situation right now where on a Friday at 9 a.m., the day the purchase and sale was due to be signed, we received an email from seller's counsel saying, hi, the seller has decided not to sell the property. No reasoning behind it. The seller was a developer. And so I had been driving to a meeting and then stopped for a coffee when I saw the email. I immediately responded, reminding them that their seller should be aware it's a binding offer. I then called their agent, who was excellent, picked up the phone right away, and explained to her what was going on. We immediately got the client on the call, explained to them what was going on. They were also a first-time buyer, which is a lot to take in. We found out from the other agent that the seller thought they undersold the value of the property. So that was at 9 a.m. At 11:30, we received a response from the seller's counsel saying, sorry, he's decided not to sell. At 1:30, I had my client speaking to a litigation attorney who I've referred to in the past. They engaged him by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. 3:30 p.m., he sent a letter saying that if they do not sign the purchase and sale due today, that they intend to file suit on Monday morning. Purchase and sale was not signed. 9 a.m. Monday morning, that litigation attorney filed a suit in the court, and the court issued what's called an ex parte, meaning the other side did not need to appear, lien against the property, which was filed at the Registry of Deeds by 3 p.m. that day. That would have never happened if they didn't have a good team helping them in this process. And a buyer on their own trying to navigate that would have been impossible. So, as I've said, an offer is binding, and all of the terms that you want in that offer for contingencies have to be included in there. And if you don't have them, then it's difficult to get them in the purchase and sale. And once signed, you can enforce that offer against the seller. So, and they can also enforce it against you. Next slide. So we've talked a little bit about the differences between the offer and the purchase already, but I'll give you some more terms that are in there. Once the offer is signed, typically you have about 14, or used to have about 14 days between offer, purchase, and sale. In more recent times, sometimes it can be only 5 days. So having an attorney who's willing to jump right on it and get things together are really important. And during that time between offer, purchase, and sale, you're doing your due diligence. Again, the risk of money from the offer is usually about about $1,000. Once you sign the P&S, it's 5%. So it's a big difference. And so you can use that time to look at things that you want to. Maybe you want to drive around the neighborhood again and make sure you didn't miss anything. You want to maybe talk to town hall and find out if there's any issues going on with that property, any permits with the property that have been taken out or closed out. You want to look to see if there are any other issues. If this is a condominium, you want to read the meeting minutes and find those details. And then your attorney is going to be negotiating the purchase and sale agreement, which I said is a much longer, more technical document. And so you want someone who knows what clauses are normal, what clauses are not normal, and who's there for you if something goes wrong, which in the situation I just mentioned happened on the day the purchase and sale was due. You wanted a person who's responsive and who's on your side and willing to just jump in the minute something goes wrong. And so that's why I think the team aspect is super important. And in that situation I was telling you about, that it's real time, ongoing right now, having a good lender is incredibly important, because when that happened, we had to immediately call the lender and tell them there will be no extensions on any dates in this agreement. We have to abide by the offer timeline. So commitment date, closing date, all of that has to be met. And I know the lender is feverishly trying to get that done right now. And so any of the contingencies that were in the offer are now going to be built into the purchase and sale agreement. The inspection issues, that contingency is typically gone by the signing of the purchase and sale, but if there were negotiated repair items or credits, all of that will be included in there. Next slide. So now the purchase and sale is signed, and we hope the seller signed. Now what? What's next? So now the most important thing after the purchase and sale is signed is to work with your lender in getting finance approved. There's a language in the purchase and sale in almost everyone that says time is of the essence, which means you have to work diligently in getting your lender what they need. So if a lender sends you a request and you ignore them for 7 to 10 days, not only is that going to jeopardize your timing, but it also could put you in default under your agreement. So you have to be responsive to your lender and get them what they need. When that purchase and sale is signed, that mortgage contingency we talked about gets embedded into the purchase and sale. And in there is a date. It's called a mortgage commitment date. So by that time, you want a letter from your lender saying that we hereby commit to giving you this loan. And in there, it may have certain terms and conditions. And it's really important to read those terms and conditions. Now, a good lender like Harvard will have a commitment letter with very few conditions. They'll have vetted most of it. But other lenders, who I won't name, sometimes have 10, 20, 30 conditions. And if you have a commitment letter like that, it's not like having a commitment letter at all, because basically it means for any one of those conditions, the lender can take back your loan. So that mortgage commitment date, which will be put into the offer that gets carried into the purchase and sale, has a deadline. And if by that date you have a commitment letter with 20 to 30 conditions, you have two choices. You have to ask the seller to extend, which won't be great because the seller could say no, and I hereby terminate. Or you have to terminate to protect your 5% deposit. So that's why it's super important to have someone who has a good team, who's working and looking for your best interest, and most importantly, to be responsive to your lender and the request that they give you. The next thing the lawyer is going to be working on your side, whoever's representing the lender, is getting the title reviewed. So title is a chain history search going back 50 years, looking back to see who owns the property and did the right people sell to the next people and have all mortgages on the property be paid off. And are there any easements on the property, if this is a home, that perhaps go right through the backyard of the property that you might want to know about? So having someone knowledgeable who knows what those things are and how to explain it to you is incredibly helpful. We in our office, when we receive title, if we note any issues on there, we mail them to the client. I know a lot of attorneys don't, and they make their own decision as to whether it's important, but I don't. I think it's important, even though you're first-time buyers and it may be daunting to hear all of this stuff, it's important if there's an easement going across your land, or if there is some sort of restriction on your property. We've had some crazy restrictions over the years, and clients have to know about them. And having an attorney to reach to explain to you, what does this mean? A lawyer can help answer all of these questions and resolve the problems during the course of the transaction. Next slide. Closing day. Now, you're going to say, what's a closing? Everyone keeps talking about this closing day. What is it? Well, back in the day, they used to call it passing of papers. And that's because it literally is passing of papers at a closing table. The morning of the closing, or it could be the night before, you're going to schedule what's called a final walkthrough with your broker. They're going to take you to the property and they're going to have you walk through it. That is your final chance to confirm if there's anything wrong with the property that might have changed from the time of the offer. Accepting out new construction, which is different. I'm not going to talk about that here, but you're going to walk through this property. You're going to look up at the ceiling. You're going to look in the closets. You're going to look at the floor. You're going to test appliances again. You're going to do all of that, because once the closing day is over and once that deed gets recorded, you have no recourse against the seller. And so you can't look at it the next day and say, oh my God, I just noticed this stain on the wall. It's too late. I always tell clients, The luckiest person is the person who either goes to a closing or final walkthrough on a day when it's pouring rain, some sort of huge wind, or some other issue, hail's great, because you're really testing the property for the soundness to make sure that there's no leaks, no other issues on the property. So once you do your final walkthrough, you're going to go to the closing attorney's office for the bank. And at that time, you'll sit around a table and there'll be this huge stack of papers at the table. You cannot negotiate the terms of those documents, or it's very difficult at that time. And if there's a mistake on the documents, you're going to experience a long delay. So what I tell people is, as you're getting documents to the bank, and I know it's a lot to read sometimes, you have to read through the documents. Make sure the terms are what you agreed upon. Make sure your name is spelled as you want it to appear on the deed. Make sure there, if you have any questions as to the terms of these documents, you do it before the closing table, because at the closing table, essentially what you're doing is signing and notarizing and trying to get the deed to record that day. And to record is the last step in the home ownership. What it means is that everything is recorded at the registry of deeds. And once it's recorded, then you are officially the owner of the property. Registry stops recording about 3:30, or they take it last ones at 3:30. So it doesn't leave a tremendous amount of time. And so you want to make sure that everything is reviewed in advance and everything on the closing date goes smoothly. You'll likely have to wire funds for closing. So what we always suggest to people is to wire them the day before the closing, so we're not waiting on wires and there's not, some sort of delay. I also strongly recommend not putting a closing on a Friday. And the reason is that last step in ownership recording, if you don't get to record because the system goes down or there's some sort of a problem, everything is left in limbo for the whole weekend. You can't move into your home. You won't receive funds if you're a seller, and nothing happens. So doing it on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, at least you have the extra business days to get to record. There's been a huge movement to close on Fridays. I've never quite understood why, because everybody really wants the weekend generally to move into their home. So get that done earlier in the week so you have that nice buffer. As I said, closings, buying a home is a great process, but having a good team who can walk you through all of that is incredibly important. And you won't know that you really need a good team until you have a really bad situation arise. And I can tell you those clients that are dealing with that issue in real time are thrilled to have the team that they did, because they really had no idea what to expect or how to navigate this process. And I'm hoping that the judge who's now ordered this lien is now going to push for the sale, and this poor buyer will get the home that they so rightfully deserve. Next slide. Final advice: purchasing a home can be stressful, and it's one of the largest financial transactions of your life. And as Dino showed you, as much as it's stressful and it can be the largest, it can be incredibly, great on a long-term basis when you see the value of your home increasing. And while you could have left that money in a bank and earning some percentage interest, look at those numbers that Dino showed us. Property values have been on the rise, and it's really, really important, to think about all of those things and deciding, do I want this property? Is this the property that's going to make me money in the future? And a good broker can help you navigate that and show you, yes, look at this property, look at this timeline, look at this area. Doing it on your own, that's information that's super hard to get from the internet, and you don't know what you're really looking at or if it's truthful information, because there's a lot of false information out there. Next slide. Again, my name is Sarah Ricciardelli. We're located in Charlestown, Massachusetts, and we've been doing this in solely real estate for a long time. I'm happy to help and answer any questions you might have, so feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Absolutely.
Now I am delighted to introduce our home inspector, Kenra. Ken is the founder of Kenra Inspections. He came from an IT background originally, but we're really lucky to have him in the home inspection world now. He's done more than 1,500 inspections, I think all in Massachusetts. Ken, you can speak to that. And I know he's certified also for wood destroying insects, wood boring insects. I'm not sure of the certification, but if you have any of those kind of issues, that's certainly a big deal. And we're delighted to have Ken back. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention today. I'm very glad to be back again. Thanks to Dino for inviting me. So we'll dive right in. Some of these slides we'll gloss over a little bit. Some of them are more about Kenza than the inspection process, so you can read about things later. Like the name of the company, the similarity to my name is 100% coincidence. It actually has meaning that has nothing to do with me. So you can go to my website or read the deck later on. But as both the other folks were saying, there's a team effort involved here, and you're the hub in that. You're the hub in that diagram there. And so, Jen, if you just tap next a couple of times, you'll get all the other folks. Oh, that was supposed to be an animated thing. So yeah, you're the hub of the thing, and other folks are the spokes, like myself, your agent. Here we go. So I'm just a part of the process here, and I have a distinct role in a limited amount of time, and throughout the whole home buying journey. Next, please. So a little bit more about me. You can read about how I approach things, how I work with agents, and all that stuff. Next. And my background, I came from IT. I've been an inspector for 7 or 8 years, something like that, and kind of lost track of how many inspections I've done, but it's over 1,500 for sure. I've trained other inspectors. I don't have the amazing creds of Dino in terms of industry involvement, but I am the chair of the task force of South Shore Realtors community outreach team. So I have some involvement, and it's a great industry to be in. And you can read all that stuff later. Next, please. Next. So why do you get a home inspection? Why not? How does it happen? How much does it cost? That sort of stuff. Next, please. So as others have been saying, you want to have a home, you want to understand what you're buying. And when you have that accepted offer with a contingency, you're trying to, when you do that offer, you're trying to figure out, should an inspection be a contingency, and what does it mean? So why do you get a home inspection? It's kind of like buying a used car. Wouldn't you have your mechanic look at a used car if you want to understand what it is before you pay for it? So you're trying to understand the condition of your investment before you sign that P&S, that second contract. You get an idea of what the condition is so that you know what might need to be repaired in the future, and that helps inform your budget, which is obviously a big part of your process, understanding what you can afford, what you want to afford. And in some cases, you'll be able to negotiate with the seller. In this market, that's typically not the case, but I defer to Dino as your agent to figure out what to do with the information I give you. But if you don't have an inspection, you have no option to do that. And you'll also get a little bit of information about what it means to be a homeowner, especially for first timers who don't know things like changing the air filter and that sort of stuff. And then you can avoid big surprises after you close. So and I'll get to that in a minute. There's a question about waiving inspections in the chat. Next, please. And then the opposite, if you don't get an inspection, the opposite of all of that, you don't know what you're buying. You don't know what the repairs might be that you need to do sooner or later. You don't have any kind of information about how what you're buying can impact your budget. There's no negotiation. You don't get the maintenance, and you do take risks. Buying something without understanding its condition is obviously a risk. And so the whole notion about waiving inspections and that sort of stuff is a giant topic. I could talk for an hour about that, but you all know it's the biggest investment you're going to make, and it's good to understand what it is before you go to that closing table. Next. So what does it cost? Every inspector I know bases their rate on the cost, on the size of the home, the square footage. And there can be some options added on. As Jen said, I'm certified to do wood destroying insects inspections. And most inspectors will offer a radon test. I actually need to update this slide to, I have a gadget called air quality tests. That I think there's another slide later on about that goes into the details of it. Somebody else asked, what is the difference in a condo inspection? There's condos versus a single family or a multifamily. And those processes are a little bit different, but the end result is the same, that you have an inspection. And I think in most of your cases, you're probably not having a detached garage or a barn or anything like that in the area that you might be buying, Cambridge, Boston, Brookline types of places. But those are generally not part of the process. It's the property you're buying and anything physically connected to it. If there was an attached garage, that would be included. So when you're shopping around for an inspector, some inspectors will add on for if the home is over a certain age, because they feel like it's harder to inspect because it's older, or how far away it is. Some inspectors add on because the basement is unfinished space, which is not counted in the square footage, which is the primary driver of the cost. But my headline here is that when you're shopping around for an inspection, if your first question is about price, you might want to rethink your approach, because in a 6-figure or maybe 7-figure investment, $50 or $100 is 1/10 of 1/100% of what you're dealing with. So I would look at services and quality of reports and other things before cost. I understand a dollar is a dollar, but every once in a while I get a price shopper, and I usually tell them I might not be the one for you because I'm not the cheapest, but it's a decision on your part. But I would say that, just to remind you, that's a one-off thing. And on a related note, when you're talking to inspectors, some of them will offer what they call a pre-inspection. Most agents call it pre-inspection. This relates to buyers who have been waiving. The market is so competitive for buyers. It's clearly a seller's market, has been for a long time. And buyers, to be competitive, will waive inspections. They'll waive lots of contingencies. And this is something you talk to your agent, talk to Dino about what's the right strategy for you and for that property and your particular budget. But in response to waiving inspections, what some inspectors started to do was this sort of walkthrough thing where they would sometimes even go to the open house with you or to the showing and pose as a friend and just sort of do a quick, 15-20 minute, whatever your walkthrough is, and then to verbally tell you later on what they saw. And then you, as the client, as the buyer, feel like, well, I had an inspector look at it and they said, everything looked good. And it gives you a false sense of comfort that you had a proper inspection. The thing to remember about these walkthroughs without a report, without looking at everything, it's a license violation all day for the inspector. And every inspector knows that. It's a big debate among the inspection industry about should you do them or not. Some agents don't realize that it's a license violation. It's not their job to understand what inspectors' license requirements are. But I would just caution you to be really, really careful about doing that. And if that inspector is willing to violate their license for that, what else are they not doing correctly? So, next, please. So the process, you've gone through the whole thing. You've been pre-qualified by your credit union. You've went out with Dino and found a property. And so what happens next? That offer to purchase has the inspection contingency, and there's always a time frame. It's usually 7 days or 10 days. So you have a date certain by which you need to get that inspection done. So you go book it online. With me, that you can do it online 24/7. There's no back and forth calling. You schedule the appointment. We all show up. We do the inspection. And then for me, it's if you're the first inspection of the day and there's no one waiting for a report, you're going to get that report the same day, typically that night. You'll get a report. You'll get a link to it. It's all online, which we'll talk about in a minute. And you review the report. And then the final step is asking questions afterwards. My mantra there is, I'm not done until you're done. So when you get that report, if you have questions, you can always get back to me. Next, please. So what types of inspections? Next. This is where I was talking about the consultation versus inspection, or the walkthrough. So inside the transaction, there are state standards of practice. I have a license just like the other folks on this panel. And my license has requirements about things that I'm required to look at, and I'm required to give you a report. So that's the comprehensive inspection. So prior to close, in between listing for sale and closing, that's inside the transaction, where I'm required to follow the standards of practice, which say I have to give you a report. There's a list of things I'm required to look at. And so that's what you're going for. That's the ideal situation. There are things that you can do in addition to an inspection that are optional, not required. Radon testing, as I mentioned, carbon monoxide testing. I have a device that does a bunch of stuff in one. If you're in a older home on the ground floor, you might want a wood destroying insect inspection, termites. And this last sentence here is kind of buried away, but it's a big issue. That's what I was talking about, consultations. That walk-through, walk and talk is allowed after you close. Anyone who owns a home can have an inspector show up and talk about things without having to follow the standards of practice because we're outside the transaction. And I haven't talked to Dino about this, but I'm launching a new service I call the Peace of Mind Home Consultation. So for those buyers who did feel compelled to waive, and they did so with clear eyes and signing an understanding to that effect, after you close, I can come in and do a verbal only walkthrough and tell you what I see, and you take notes, and you get 70% or so of the same information as you would get from an inspection with a written report. And then you have an understanding of where you are, what you're dealing with, what the main headlines are. And there are things that I can talk about when I'm not constrained by my license that I'm not allowed to talk about as an inspector, such as my personal opinion about things, the cost of repairs. There are some constraints lifted. So if you do end up going through and waiving your inspection because it makes your offer stronger or whatever, then you have an option with me to do a consultation. Sometimes I'll get someone will book me and say, I'm closing on Friday. Can you come do or Tuesday, can you come do a consultation on Wednesday? So if I do 10 of those consultations, 3 of those clients are kind of upset because they didn't know what they didn't know, and they get some big surprises. And maybe 4 or 5 of them are happy and relieved, and the other 2 or 3 are like, yeah, okay, I can deal with that. So it's a mixed bag. It's a giant risk. It's something to think about. Next, please. So just a little bit more about the difference between a consultation and an inspection. So with a full inspection, you get a detailed list of things that are required to be inspected, and you get a written report. With a consultation, there's no report. It's not as detailed. It does take less time because we're just spending an hour at your property looking at things. So those are just sort of the highlights of the differences. Next, please. Like I said, there's some additions. The air quality test I have a device that actually no one else in the state has that does 6 tests in one. That's why I call it air quality instead of radon. And you can read about that on my website as well. Next, please. But here's the main differences. So most inspectors will do radon canisters, which are just passive charcoal devices that just give you one number. So my device is electronic. It takes a reading every hour. It has tamper resistance. There's no delay in getting the results with a canister test. It has to be mailed off to a lab. So when you're in that window of time, saving a couple of days can make a difference with the electronic monitor versus the passive canister, which has to be mailed and analyzed by a lab. Next, please. Little other things that I do, some extra stuff that's not really relevant to you guys. So next, please. So what's in an inspection? What is included? The overarching theme for me is answering the question, will you be warm, safe, and dry? It's an unofficial question. It's not written down, but that's the sort of the theme of the thing. And I do that by looking at 3 big buckets of categories of things. Number 1 is always safety. Number 2 is water. And number 3 is big ticket items. So those are the sort of buckets and categories of things, but they're related to the list of things that I'm required to inspect. And what does that list look like? Next, please. So the standards of practice clearly describe each and every component that has to be looked at. For me, the standards are the minimum. For some inspectors, they're the maximum. The inspector is allowed to just only do what's required by the standards, and that's their ceiling. For me, it's the floor. I add on a lot of stuff that other inspectors don't add on. So there's lots of components. And this, again, is a single family. A lot of you might be involved in a multi-unit building, condominium or townhouse, but the essential ideas are the same. There's an exterior and there's a roof. There's the grounds, which is everything that's not the house, things like walkways and retaining walls and decks and things like that. Next. Most of you care mostly about the inside, and this is where you have very different eyes than I do, because you're looking at the layout and the color and the function, how many bedrooms are there and that sort of thing. I'm looking at the condition and the quality and the functionality from a very different perspective. But the interior of the inspection is actually usually the quickest part, because it's mostly about the functionality of the plumbing, the kitchen and the bathrooms. The general interior stuff is usually fairly quick. In terms of standards of practice, so I don't know any inspector who will test the functionality of laundry machines, but I do. Or look at the refrigerator, even if it's not built in, if it's a freestanding refrigerator, does the ice maker have ice in it? Is the freezer cold enough? I'm looking at the functionality of all the appliances, even though they're not required. Next, please. If there is a basement, that's usually where I spend the most time. Things like the plumbing, electrical panel, heating system, water heater. Sometimes in shared environments, those things are not accessible, or they're building maintenance only, or they're just not present. You're on the 4th floor and you have a garden style condo, and a lot of the building stuff is shared amongst all the units, and we'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. But in a typical single family, or even a townhouse, or the top floor of a condo environment, there are different things to look for. But in general, these components are the longest, and I usually do save the basement for last. I do an outside in and then a top to bottom approach to the process. So there's literally hundreds of things to look at, and when you're in the inspection process with me, it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot to absorb, but everything you need to know is going to be in the written report, and we'll talk about that next, coming up here. Next, please. So somebody asked, is it different for a condo in the chat there? It is different. For some inspectors, they will just not look at anything but the interior of the unit you're buying. So let's say there's a 20-unit garden style condo building, and you're buying one of those units, and most inspectors will limit what they're doing to the interior of that unit, maybe the exterior just for that unit. For me, I'm super nosy. I want to see all the things, and I try to get to everything I possibly can. The main 2 types of condos are converted 3 families and larger buildings. And when there's more than 4 units, it's actually commercial space in terms of the zoning. But for any of them, I want to see everything I can possibly get to. And part of the reason for that is, as Sarah was saying, in the condo documents, you want to understand what the financial health of the association is, the HOA, the homeowners association. So I'll look at things that aren't necessarily a unit, that would not have a functional impact, because they might have a financial impact. So for example, in a 3-family, and you're buying that middle unit, it's not your roof, but it is, and it's not your basement, but it is. It's part of the building. And so it's common for HOAs to take care of exterior things, the siding, the roof, the grounds. But if they're accessible to me, I will look at them and include them in the report, because there might be a financial impact. So let's say the HOA has a plan to replace the roof, and there's money in the reserves, or maybe there's going to be a special assessment for it. I don't read the condo documents. I don't get into that level of detail. I defer to the experts on your team, Dino and Sarah, to give you that information. But I just say what I see and put it in the report for you. Next, please. So there are some limitations. There are things that, as I mentioned, there's some constraints in my license. I'm not allowed to discuss the cost of repairs. It's very explicit. If an inspector says to you, well, that water heater is going to cost $2,000, maybe ask them why they're saying that. They're not allowed, and they know it. There are inspectors who advertise on their website, here's a common list of common prices of repairs that we find in inspections, and it's just not allowed. The price of the home has nothing to do with me. I stay in my lane. Dino is your expert. Is that the right price? What's the right offer? The most common one I get, though, as an inspector, my clients will ask me, would you buy this house? And it's a legit question, but I'm not allowed to answer it. And that one, in fact, even if I was allowed, I would avoid answering it, because it doesn't really matter if I would buy it. What matters is if you would buy it. So my role is to give you objective information to be able to answer that question for yourself. If we were doing a consultation outside the transaction, you wouldn't be asking me that, but I would be able to talk about the price of the home, or the cost of the repairs, and that sort of thing. So there are constraints inside the transaction. And then there's just common, sense things, like if there's something that's a locked door, or there's, tons of storage stuff blocking access to the electrical panel, Anything that I can't physically get to, if a crawl space is sealed up, or if there's a multi-unit building and the building maintenance team does not allow me onto the roof or into the utility room, or it's locked, I note what I can't get to. I just can't get to it. And then sometimes sellers will have instructions: don't touch this light switch, don't go into that room. We're all guests in the home until the closing date, until it's recorded with the deed, and so I follow the instructions. And then sometimes clients will ask me, did it pass inspection? There's no such thing as passing an inspection from the inspector. You're the boss of whether it passes or fails. And I don't really think of things as pass fails. It just is what it is. You decide if it's acceptable to you, if there are things that you want to deal with. And also in terms of if there are negotiations with the seller, your offer to purchase might have a spending limit, which tells the seller anything under X, we're not going to negotiate. So that, when you get my inspection report about the condition of the property, that factors into your choice about whether it passes or fails. So even if I could give a pass fail, I wouldn't, because it's your role to decide that. It's my role to give you the information to decide that. Next, please. So then you get the report. Like I said, it's usually within 24 hours. I'm not sending you a PDF attached to an email. I'm a very technology forward person. Like I said, my background is in IT. So you get a link to a live online system on the internet. It's easy to extract information from it. It understands the size screen you're using, so it's phone friendly. You can tap on a photo to see that photo full size. It's interactive. There's this wizard you can use called the Repair Request Builder. If you're negotiating with a seller, you can selectively choose the items that you want to send to them and create a new report just with those things, so that the seller's agent doesn't have to see the whole entire report, or your agent, Dino, doesn't have to copy paste things into an email. It's just a few clicks and you can share information selectively at your discretion. It's always online. You can make a PDF if you really, really want to, but you don't need to. Next, please. So when you're looking for a home inspector, some things to consider. I think the number one thing you can do from a distance without talking to anybody is just compare reports side by side. What is the quality of that report? Is it easy to read? Is it understandable? Is it complete? Is it detailed? Is it user friendly, or is it dense and using a lot of lingo? Can you see photos? Are they delivering you a PDF which has a tiny little fixed size photo? So you have the options you want: air quality, termite inspections, exceeding standards like including laundry machines and refrigerators. Some inspectors don't want you there until the very end. Does the inspector encourage your participation or not? And what is their experience? Most people say, well, how long have you been an inspector? Which is an understandable way of asking it. But if an inspector has been doing it for 20 years, but they've only done 10 inspections a year, they're still a rookie in terms of experience. So what kind of certifications do they have? What kind of experience do they have? And notice I don't say anything on there about price. The quality of the experience, the clarity of information, the usefulness of the deliverable should be in my opinion, should be your primary factors. Next, please. No such thing as a perfect house. Every house has problems, even new constructions. I'll find something for a plumber, something for an electrician. I did a new construction garden condo in East Boston last week, which had windows that folded in. So you pulled the handles down and the windows open in like this. And across the top was installed the blind, and it prevented the windows from opening. So it was kind of a funny thing, but we're all looking at our heads scratching like, how did this happen? You physically cannot open the windows. The blinds are physically blocking it. So there's always something to find. And that's just one of the reasons you want to get an inspection. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, Ken. We really appreciate your wealth of expertise. I know that our attorney, Sarah Ricciardelli, does have a hard stop. And if any of you have a hard stop, feel free to drop off. You can always watch the questions afterwards. Thank you, Sarah, I saw you were answering questions in the Q&A. So we're going to give you the contact info of everyone. So feel free to drop out, Sarah, and we
Thank you.
much appreciate your participating. And if people do want to stay on, we're going to just go through a couple more things and answer your questions as well. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
We have Ryan Douglas with us, who is one of our senior mortgage loan originators. And Ryan, do you want to just briefly say about having Harvard FCU as part of that team?
Yeah, sure thing. We want to get to the questions here, so I'll be quick. But hi again, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So just to quickly overview this, we go through this every day when you're on the call with us. So benefits of having the Harvard FCU on your team during the home buying process. So we have that personalized service. We love working with you. We're available 7 days a week to assist you for your every needs. So give us a call anytime. Range of mortgage products to fit your needs. The process of applying with us can be digital. It's all online. We can meet with you in person as well. Post-closing, we have all in-house loan servicing. So any questions you ever have post-closing, give us a call. Somebody over in the Cambridge office will be there to assist you. And then we have portfolio lending capability as well. And then really kind of the biggest benefits with us is the competitive rates and credits. So as we've mentioned all week, we do give you a discounted interest rate for establishing a Crimson Elite checking account with us. So you get 0.125, 1/8% off of your interest rate for establishing that checking account with an automatic payment. We have low down payment options for eligible borrowers. So we covered that all yesterday. The recordings will be available for you to touch base on. If you have any questions, give us a call, of course. And then if you are a first-time home buyer, we do give you a $500 closing cost credit as well.
Thanks.
So let's answer some questions, huh?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
Just before I grab the questions, every day I just try and mention GreenPath. If you want to get free financial counseling to improve your credit, to look at your budget, if you need counseling on student loans, we have a partnership with a nonprofit called GreenPath. You do not need to be a credit union member. By being on this call, you're eligible to get free financial counseling from GreenPath. We highly recommend that as part of your home buying journey. So now, thank you to our panelists for answering questions as we're going. Some of them are already answered in the Q&A. But we definitely are getting some questions in about whether or not it makes sense to build in different kinds of things for your home inspection when you're making your offer, Dino. So for example, we have a question, would the presence of lead, a contingency about the presence of lead, make an offer non-competitive for any home built before 1982? I'm not sure about the date, what that is in reference to, but Dino, can you speak to that about the competitiveness of the offer?
So the date is 1978, and unfortunately, most of the inventory in New England has lead paint. And so there is definitely it's something that most sellers are not going to take that contingency. I mean, you can write it in. It's just an unfortunate situation, and Sarah's no longer on the call, but from a legal perspective, I always defer to the attorney to discuss it. But just to protect, we have to protect ourselves. But I would say 100% of my sellers will not take that contingency. It's an unfortunate thing. I don't know what else to say about it. Ken, I don't know if you have an opinion.
That there are things, I know there are things you can do because my house has lead. It was built in 1890.
Yeah.
It was painted over the
mitigate.
years, and I raised my child here, and you have to encapsulate the lead. And I don't know, Ken, if you want to say anything to that, but
Sure. It's something I look for and mention. There are lead inspectors. It's a separate license in Massachusetts. You can have a lead inspection if you want to. I'm not a lawyer either, but I do know it's the one required disclosure from the seller is their lead paint. And they all say, I don't know, because they're not required to test. They're only required to say what they know. When I'm doing an inspection, I always tell my clients roughly 1980 is my cutoff, because in 78, they said no more lead paint, no more asbestos, but you can still sell what you already made. I've seen it as up into the mid 80s. But anyway, I know what lead paint looks like, and I have an informational comment. This might be lead paint. You might want to get it tested. But things can be scarier than they sound. or sound scarier than they are, I should say. So it's a really common thing. And as Jen was saying, you can encapsulate it. You can ask for the history. You can get it inspected. You have options to deal with it.
Then we have a question that I'm going to direct to Ryan. This attendee says that what about if they're going to retire within a year after purchasing their home? What do they need to provide in terms of, future income in order to become eligible to get a mortgage with the credit union?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're retiring within a year, what we're going to do, we're going to look at your current salary. We're going to take that all into account. And then, really though, it's kind of more of a personal thing, when your financial kind of overview changes post-closing, you really want to make sure that you can kind of carry that mortgage payment, when your situation does change. But as far as the application and the approval, we're going to use your current income and, borrower worthiness at that time.
And again, GreenPath is a great resource for folks. I know Ty put that link in the chat. If you're not sure if you can afford your mortgage going forward, talk to GreenPath, make a budget, make a retirement budget as well as a current one, because you don't want to get yourself into a situation where you're facing difficulty making your mortgage payment. Ken, could you let us know, do you inspect for aluminum versus copper electrical? Is that possible?
Yes, absolutely. In the standards of practice, I'm required to identify a lot of different materials, including the electrical wiring. Is there any aluminum wire? I remove the covers off electrical panels to look inside at the wires coming into the breakers. That's just one of the many things. The one thing that can trip people up is knob and tube wiring, which is a different kind of electrical wiring that has not been used for about 100 years. The main concern with that is around insurance. Some insurance companies won't insure you for that, but they're all a little bit different. So it's just something to be aware of. But yes, I do look for that.
Okay. Thank you. Ryan, could you also speak to, we have a question about, are the rates for investment properties different? And what are those now for condos? So I know at Harvard FCU, you can buy a 2-family or multifamily and get a mortgage with us if you're going to live in it. Is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, we can do investment properties as well if you're
Okay.
not going to. So that's perfectly fine. If it's going to be an owner-occupied multifamily, that's good to go as well. What was the first question? Are you asking about like what happens with the interest rates on an
Are
investment?
the
Did I
rates
hear that
different
correct?
than for
Yeah.
investment
So if it's a
properties?
flat out investment property, not going to be owner occupied, anticipate an increase to that interest rate. Typically you see about half a percent to 1%. It really all kind of depends on the full situation. So if you have a specific, you can reach out. We can give you a quote.
Okay, thank you.
Hope I answered that.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for not knowing
No,
all that.
no problem.
Great to
Yeah.
know. Ken, we have a couple of people who are hoping that if it's new construction, they don't need an inspection, whether it be a condo or a single family. What do you have to say about that? I think we went to that a little bit with the blinds. Wasn't that new construction?
That was new construction. The most compelling story I have about new construction was in Newton. There was a single family. It was torn down, put up a duplex side by side. Each one I think was 1.4 million. The builder said it's 100% ready. They had a certificate of occupancy, the CO. I do the inspection. There was a broken window. There was a furnace for the second floor that was not connected, so there was no heat on the second floor. The water heater had an error on the panel. There was no hot water. When I turned on the oven, it tripped a breaker. So there was just some basic functionality, heat, hot water, cooking that was not present. So I did the inspection, did the report. Buyer went back to the builder. Builder said they fixed all the stuff. The agent who I've known for years asked me as a favor, will you go through that walkthrough? Sarah mentioned doing the final walkthrough before you go to the closing table. So I did, and I went to the final walkthrough. And the first thing I did was go to the oven and turn on the oven, and it tripped a breaker. So even after the builder said it was done, and then they said they fixed it, it was still a problem. So there are humans involved, and that's my tagline. It's actually on the back of my business cards. No such thing as a perfect house. And most builders are really good, and they want to close as bad as the buyer does, and so they'll fix stuff. But there's always something to find. It's just I've never had a clean report with nothing to fix.
Yeah, and let me add something.
Yeah,
Representation. I keep coming back to that word in I was responding to a lot of the messages. And so I've had so many new construction properties, and I highly recommend that my buyer hire an inspector because they have to be represented. The seller is giving a finished product and the building department is approving the building permits, but you need to learn. You need to know how the system is working, and anything, you'll find anything. And that's what it is. It's representation. You need someone to represent you. So yes, inspection on new construction, please.
and that's a good distinction to make. The difference between the town building inspector versus a home inspector. The town building inspector is looking at code and things like that. They have very different eyes. They're maybe there for 20 minutes. You know, they're not looking at the same things as a home inspector.
Thank you so much. I do want to just go through our final slides, just to let you know that we're sending you these. You will have a way to make an appointment to talk to any of our mortgage loan officers. You're also going to get the panelists information in case you want to reach out to them directly to ask your questions. Here is the link to access our mortgage rates. You can always check those out. We had some questions about rates and things. We would like your survey feedback. As I said, it's very important to us to know how we did and how we can improve. So please fill that out for us. We appreciate you, our attendees. And tomorrow we're going to talk, for those of you who have some home equity already. I know we had one question about that and are maybe thinking about selling and then, you know, either buying again or whatever you might be thinking about. If you already have some home equity in your home, or you're just curious about what that looks like and what options there are once you have equity, do think about coming tomorrow. We're going to have a great panel. You will get everything sent to you. So I just want to wrap up by saying thank you again to our panel. Thank you, Ryan, Ken, Dino, and Sarah, who did have to drop off. I know we learned a lot today, and I hope that the attendees also took away all your wisdom, and thanks so much, because we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate having me.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.